Uh, Start recording now, and we are not formally started yet, but welcome everyone. I see you rolling in. This is our fifth Smart Firefighting Roundtable, and welcome Sam. Yeah, I just love seeing the people roll in. Fifth Smart Firefighting Roundtable. We did take a little hiatus last month because of the Technology Summit International that was going on. So that was an epic show. I think there was a few people here that I see on the screen that were there. So it was great. What an awesome show. Shout out to TSI and shout out to all the team that put it together. IFC from Doolin, Roseberry, Muncie, Clay, Corey, just a bunch of rock stars that organized that event. So really a special event. So just for the sake of kind of getting going, and remember, this is a piece of content that'll live on the internet forever. We'll repurpose it. So always good to create content. We're going to be repurposing in different ways. But really excited today to be talking about immersive learning. We are fortunate to be blessed with a couple awesome speakers, and then everyone else in here that you're looking at. We have retired Captain Kirk McKenzie, who is now the founder of McKenzie Smart Technologies, Dr. James Mullins, the Chief Technology Officer at Flame Systems, and Dr. Jason Moats, who's the TEACS Testing Director of Innovation Center at Texas A&M. So some really awesome speakers and firepower here amongst some of the other people I'm seeing roll into the chat. And just want you to think about in this sort of umbrella conversation about immersive learning. What is it? What's the value of a tool? How is it a complementary tool and not necessarily replacing? There's a lot of kind of misnomers on what is immersive learning, and we want this to be a chance to sort of talk about what immersive learning is and what it isn't, and also kind of a chance to talk about the art of the possible. There's a lot of different nuances between XR and VR and all these different dynamics, and got some really interesting lead speakers here. So James, Jason, and Kirk are all going to speak for about 3 to 5 minutes. And then after that, we're going to go into open Q&A roundtable. And in that, I ask that you give your 2 cents, ask a question, just throw something out there. But I ask kind of I want to prevent any sort of self-promotion of anything. And obviously, I don't really need to say this with this community, but just to approach all of conversations and questions with respect for other people's ideas and opinions. So obviously never really worried about that amongst this community, but always a reminder. So again, just raise your physical or virtual hand once we get started. And without further ado, great to see people roll in. I'm going to first turn it over to my partner in crime, Captain Kirk McKenzie. And Kirk, please take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And have I got my screen share properly?
Yep,
on?
It is sharing.
On House Resolution 1399, this is something that I like to talk about, how for fire, rescue, EMS, public safety, we are not going to prevent this coming. There's actually a House resolution looking to make November extended reality month and saying in the next 7 years or so, we might be looking at 23 million jobs and maybe 450 billion in market cap in the space. The United States now has a reality caucus. Highly recommend you take a look at xra.org. And also, you've heard of the metaverse. Well, there's now metaverse standards. How will we all work together in immersive learning for public safety in an integrated open API architecture? There's now more than 1,900 teams just in a couple months, including some of the major players that are going to make a difference. So a little of my background starts 32 years in the field and did some different kind of synthetic training, if you will. So immersive learning is not the real thing. But then again, to me, the real thing is not the real thing. That is, when we train in live fire, we train with wood and oriented strand board or plywood and hay. And that the heat release rate of that is not the same as the heat release rate of plastic furniture or foams. And so here's a fire model, compliments to Dr. Marco Lucerto, who put this together, that you could view natively on a smartphone in a physics-based fire model and look at how real-world fuels would propagate inside the flash can. We could go inside there and be inside the environment virtually, immersively, if you will. And thanks to James Mullins, who might just follow me here in a moment, who came up from Australia to help with a project we did in conjunction with DHS and NASA to train an artificial intelligence program. Now, the video hasn't been released publicly, but for those that train in live fire, what if you captured it in 360 video and used it as a long-term public education and training tool? And in this case, this is representing more real time. I think we have Captain Justin Carissa on the call from Casumas Fire. He actually built this children's nursery and put the fuel in there, and all that was ignited was paper in a wicker basket. And I have never been to a training fire that was like this. But this one with the real world fuels, and we were 1800 F at the floor, 50 kilowatts a meter squared in less than 2 minutes. So when people are doing live fires, I would suggest they record it in 360 and start an immersive learning program within your local jurisdiction, for instance. This is some of the about $250,000 worth of equipment, systems, and software donated to the fire department. James Mullins doing great work with a physics-based fire model program. This second slide of his shows what it might be like to do structure prep on a wildland fire. And I remember going out to Ione, the California Cal Fire training facility, for a structure prep class. And they said, okay, well, you have 3 minutes to get that house ready. What are you going to affect? Or maybe you have 5 minutes or 10 or 15, but we don't have all day to get a home ready for an oncoming fire front. And compliments to Flame on this opportunity for key performance indicators and recognition prime decision for new firefighters to get a feel in immersive learning. And my last slide is about a little project I'm working on with San Bernardino County about, hey, if we have the 3D model of a facility, in this case, crash rescue, and this was compromised the laser scan data and photogrammetry data from some friends that just say, hey, we'll get together and do this. And then Marco Losurdo, in conjunction with Stefan Truthen at HHP Berlin, put together this mixed reality fire model that, again, is just running natively on a smartphone. And so you could go to this facility, train in real life with propane, which of course is different than an actual airplane on fire, or you could do it immersively. And in this case, this mixed reality, Unity-based program. And it just, for me, it's an inspiring time to be in the space of immersive learning and looking at the different opportunities. So Dr. Mullins, would you mind picking up where I left off?
And just there's Kirk, thank you for that. A couple of comments, because a lot of people joined in. We're going to have James, Dr. Mullins, and Dr. Motes are both going to speak next. But just encourage everyone to think of ideas, think of questions as the speakers are talking. Fire up the chat. What are some things you're thinking about? We'll be documenting everything. And I want you to think about how you can be selfish later and ask questions that benefit you and ask questions that really spark some good conversations. So James, take it away. You're on mute, James. Still on mute.
Test me. Test 1, 2.
You're back. You're back.
Fantastic. So I guess hopefully Kevin can translate for the Australian down here at the moment. My background is third generation firefighter. I've been in the fire service myself for 28 years. Went away to university, got out of my smallish town, I guess, and did an engineering degree, and started doing a lot of work in medical robotics, training simulation for surgery, and did my PhD in that area. And I guess I saw what the military were doing in training tactical shooting and so forth in virtual immersive environments, and thought, well, why can't we do something for firefighter training? And I was, I guess, a little bit surprised a few years ago that not too many people were combining virtual immersive and learning with the fire industry. And I guess I'd just like to point out, I guess, that immersive learning, is a tool. I grew up in my early university days. We started with the blackboard, the overhead transparencies. We moved on to PowerPoint and presentations that way. And we're starting to move into e-learn, obviously. And virtual immersive learning is just another tool in the toolbox. One of the criticisms we see in industry is, this is going to replace what we do now. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Virtual immersive learning is a tool that goes alongside traditional training experiences. And it enables us to train using, in areas that we can't traditionally train in. We can train for structural collapse. We can train for the jobs that are a little bit bigger, high risk, low incident events, I guess, is what we're trying to get into with this kind of technology. And as I mentioned before, immersive learning isn't new. Flight simulators have been around since the 30s. You'll see on the left there one of the very, very early simulators. The middle simulator, a Cat D training simulator like that, could be anywhere from $30 to $100 million. But really, what we're starting to see is that organisations are moving across, like US Air Force, and are moving across to the lower fidelity, but simulators that allow people to jump into the training platforms more readily and train more often, and trying to address some of the skills fade that we're seeing, because both firefighters and our military are not getting into the full fidelity simulations and hot fire training and so forth as regularly as we'd hope them to. Some great research by some of these great organisations around how immersive learning is faster to train in the classroom. People are more focused and more emotionally connected, and we've got some great case studies on all of that kind of learning and these sort of learning outcomes. And it enables us to scale our training across geographically fairly large areas. How do we keep our training consistent across our fire services in our state or federally across the country? So what we do is, virtual immersive environments in multiple different types of environments, but I'm very conscious and I'm not going to talk too much about what we specifically do. But, we've got a big push over here in Australia, and I know parts of the US are doing this as well. Apologies, there's a combination of pounds and dollars and kilos and liters, and I'm sure we can translate there. But what we're trying to do is reduce exposure, obviously, as well too. So we can do a lot of different training iterations without exposure to PFAS or CO2 or the byproducts of carbonaceous burns. And obviously, we're not alone in this. Our friends at Daly and everyone that's working in this industry is really working to understand our target domain, and NFPA and NAFTD and all of these organisations are starting to see that this could be and should be, and in my belief will be a valid way of imparting knowledge from one person to another. Beyond that, I've just got a couple of very quick videos. We're doing a lot of work in multi-user. So what multi-user basically means is that we can put multiple people in a training simulation together. But what really excites me is we could have training instructors from theoretically anywhere in the world working with crews from theoretically anywhere in the world, imparting knowledge. And really the fire service is about sharing ideas and knowledge. And I think this is critical for our improvements in our tradecraft. Let me just flick on some really exciting stuff in foam. Sorry. So foam on the right here, you can see we're spending a lot of time on foam because here in Australia, we can't use foam at all for training due to the risk of contamination. We've removed our AFFF foams from service, and we're using different foams now, but we still haven't been allowed to use foam for training, which means the first time our firefighters use foam, or our new firefighters will use foam, will be operationally. So how do we train them and teach them? Now, this is some very early work of what we're doing about recreating the physics of the firefight using foam. But I think it's critical that we can show people how to do that part task training in some of these environments, And then I saw, Kirk, what you were doing with your aircraft simulation. This is some of the work we've been doing, and I'll just flick through to getting to the actual job itself. Once again, very, very early days. This will be pushed out in an upcoming release, but we can have some very, very large scale incidents, but then get into the pointy end of the dynamic risk assessment and decision making that you make inside an aircraft. So I'm just going to flick into the aircraft in just a second. It's probably not the right video, but we can get inside the aircraft and do the casualty rescue and extrication and so forth as well. We'd love to work with a number of organisations, and there's a lot of good friends on this call today. I think it's also critical to talk about the data that we can get out of these types of systems, because really we need to be a data-based decision-making organisation in the fire service. It's very hard to get this kind of data traditionally from live fire, hot fire burns. So, some of these new technologies will enable us to capture some of this data and really change our doctrine in delivering training and start to tailor training to the individual. And that's all I had. So thank you very much.
Thank you, James. A lot of good thoughts and ideas. And again, encourage everyone to fire up the chat, come up with ideas, because right after Dr. Motes goes, we're going to open up to the audience. And if you don't raise your hand, I will voluntold you to talk. So just get ready. Or you don't have to talk if you really don't want to. But Dr. Motes, please, the floor is yours. I'm going to pin you spotlight for everyone so kind of people can see you. So you're now on the big screen. Floor is yours, Jason.
Well, I have to say that's the first time I've been pinned, and I appreciate that, Kevin. Thank you.
No problem.
So as Kevin said, my name is Jason Motes. I'm the director of the TEACS Testing and Innovation Center down here in College Station. And I'm really happy to be able to talk about immersive learning, immersive training, because it's an area that I've been studying since the early 2000s. A lot of folks will stick with the you've got to be in the headset and in virtual environments, and the reality is immersive training runs a whole spectrum of everything from that high fidelity virtual environment to all the way down to physical environments that kind of wrap around you. And so we've been able to here within Disaster City and in the fire training field, we've been able to have a full, one of the fullest spectrums of immersive learning that you can imagine from. And so, but it comes down to what works best. And I think that's the question. You've heard a lot of discussion about, okay, well, we've got these scenarios, we've got these kinds of things, but when do we want to invoke immersive learning? And the better question is, what is best for the application? And I think that's going to take a lot of time to sit down and think about in a very strategic and a very thoughtful manner. Because while people are concerned about using this technology and being able to do that, not everybody has access to all of the things that you need to. Not everybody has the resources to buy different things. And so it becomes an issue where we've got to figure out what and how to translate immersive learning technologies and immersive learning itself to those folks that have and to the have-nots. I think the other piece of it is it comes up to acceptance, and how do we get people to buy into the training? And I'll give a quick short story on this. In 2003, I was part of the team that helped develop an immersive course called Enhanced Incident Management Unified Command. And it's a course that was funded by the Department of Homeland Security to teach people how to work together in an instant command post. When we got to our pilots, the first pilot we did, everybody kind of dug in and played with our simulation, played within the larger simulator, and were able to accomplish the goals of the course. The second course, something very unexpected happened. Of the 35, 40 people that were in the course, more than half of them closed their computers and reverted back to using a legal tablet and some markers. And that's how they managed the incident. And, it's not wrong. It's just a different way of doing it. And in the third one, we had a little bit of a mix. And so that sparked the question about, why do some people choose to accept technology and why don't they? And it's really built on the answers to three questions. The first is, will this technology, this immersive learning technology, help them do their job better? The second is, can they see themselves using the technology? And the third becomes, is the juice worth the squeeze? Meaning, is the effort that they put into learning the technology and using it, and sometimes the frustration, worth what they get in payout for that? And a lot of times we will include technology just for the sake of having it. And that does become wrong answer. So I think as we talk about this, those three questions become a really important part of immersive learning technology. And then another piece of it is, and this goes back to, I think Chief McKenzie talked about it a little bit in terms of people being afraid that they're going to lose their job because this technology is coming into place. The answer I have is, well, it depends on whether or not you want to change, because the technology is going to change, the requirements are going to change, and how we do things now are not going to be how we teach people in the future. And so looking at that, we have to be as adaptable as we possibly can to the needs of our learners, to the needs of our departments, because not only do we have this wonderful technology that we're bringing in to immerse people in environments and give them high fidelity experiences, but we also have, we're going to start seeing this technology becoming operationalized in the field. And if we can operationalize in the field, we need to be able to use it in the classroom. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'd like to hear what other people think about that. So Kevin, I'll turn it back to you.
Right on time, guys. Thank you so much. Well, that was 20 minutes of some really powerful, great insights. I am taking a bunch of notes in the side document about some of the ideas and questions. But this is really the fun part. As I mentioned before, this is a informal conversation with structure. And this is sort of if you want to talk, raise your hand or just start talking. And ideally, again, want you to ask a question, give some 2 cents. They want to prevent anyone talking for necessarily longer than 2 minutes, just to keep it going around. But I see like an initial question from Cindy. So Cindy, I'm just going to tag you. Tell us quickly who you are and ask your question if possible.
Hi, Cindy L., Firefighter Cancer Foundation from Vermont, New England, USA. Just briefly, have we moved yet to create any regional relationships with, say, either training centers or these technologies where you can take advantage of this platform when you're dealing with inclement weather periods? In other words, high humidity, high heat periods during summer or wintertime when you have parts of the country that are literally shut in to ice and snow.
Kirk or James, Jason, any of you want to give a swing at that one?
You know, I'll take the first swing at it. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but that's not to say they don't exist. I mean, we have regional partnerships all across the country for training centers. You know, we've seen regional training centers. We've seen, I'm thinking specifically about Northern Kentucky, where 3 counties have come together and created this regional training center. And then the Kentucky Community and Technical College system has fire training throughout the state in a regional format. And so as you look at those kinds of things, or as we talk about those things, I don't think that's too far-fetched. And it makes a lot of sense, particularly when we start talking about the rural areas.
And I guess from what I've seen, Cindy, we're starting to see quite a few community colleges and townships pick this kind of technology up for exactly that reason. In the community college sense, I guess it's because from what I understand of the US model, they can't use or go or have access to hot fire training. So it gives them the engagement and keeps them motivated and interested while they're reaching the age where they can go to the more traditional hot fire training grounds. We certainly know of a few companies in the US that are using our technology and other technologies to engage with a number of their local fire departments. So I think that movement is starting to happen, and it's really interesting to decide or to see who is driving this. Is it coming from the tech companies? Is it coming from the traditional fire training companies? And we're seeing it's a bit of a combination of both. People are getting together and saying, well, you know, we understand the technology, we understand the fire and the training. Let's combine our strengths, I guess, and go out into the communities that we serve. And that seems to be what we're starting to see happen. But it's still very early days.
And Cindy, or you go, sorry.
Yeah, and to me, it is early days, but when we look at the metaverse, 1,900 member teams in less than 3 months, talking about, they have subcommittees for all sorts of things. And I pinged the folks at NVIDIA and Cesium, which is a 3D, worldwide program, to say, hey, how about public safety as a working group? Because they have them for various uses. And one of them is avatar fashion. Because there's going to be millions of people in gaming engines in the relative near future, and immersive social interaction with digital scent and haptic feedback. We'll shake hands and smell what's for dinner on the other side of the planet relatively soon. And so the live digital twin of a training facility being utilized in a cozy, warm location in the winter or an air-conditioned place in the summer, I think is soon, relatively speaking. And we're all explorers here, is the way I see it.
And my thoughts of reading that question, Cindy, was I know there has been a lot of interest in immersive learning for being able to train 12 months of the year, regardless of the weather outside. And of course, the weather outside is something you need to practice for. But I know some Army bases, there's some, maybe it was Air Force Base in Korea, have been using the VR technology to be able to do live fire 12 months of the year. And likewise, areas in Arizona where it's maybe too hot to train the summer, to be able to train on stuff without needing to go outside and unnecessarily risking an injury during training. So thanks, Cindy. I see a couple other people, and I'm gonna voluntold Dano. If you wanted to kind of maybe give anything you've seen or heard from so far, just quick, who are you? And I'd love to hear kind of any of your 2 cents on what you've heard so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak fast so I can keep within my 2-minute limit for talking. Dana DeBrew, I'm a principal program manager with Microsoft Mixed Reality, former Army officer, Navy civilian. I was a volunteer firefighter for a whopping 3 months. But I'm trying to get Microsoft Mixed Reality, specifically the engineering organization, to explore supporting emergency services. One thing, and I was typing this up in the chat window before I was voluntold to talk, is the DoD has a training construct called live, virtual, and constructive. And one of the things that we found in some funded work that we're doing with AFRL is it's really challenging to make sure that you have similar arousal performance peaks across each of the training modalities. If someone is in a live fire building, they will probably have higher arousal than someone doing it, within a completely, virtual or completely immersive environment. So what we're exploring, and again, it's for a totally different use case, it's for training pilots, is having an adaptive difficulty rating, taking biometric things. So EEG, galvanic skin response, and eye tracking. And if a user who, if they were in a T6, their stress of, if I screw up, I'm going to crash and die. When you're in a simulator, the stress is, well, I'm going to fail this task. So, we up and amp the difficulty to make sure that they would have a similar, peak, that they would if they were in a physical environment. So, to Dr. Motz's point and to Dr. Mullen's point, I love the fact that, immersive does not equal, necessarily just equal virtual reality. It's using extended reality technologies to enhance the training facilities and capabilities and modalities that you already have. And now I'm going to delete my half-finished comment.
If you have any links that you could share, that'd be great. But James or Jason or Kirk, do you want to add on to anything Dano just said?
Yeah, Dano, I think that's right. One of the things that we're really missing in terms of this, a lot of the immersive technology we've seen is that stress factor, because we know, we've got research that goes all the way back to Drabek and Quarantelli that talks about organizational stress and the influences it has on decision making. And so that was one of the things in the early days of the enhanced course that we ramped up stress by increasing the complexion of the incident, and through conflict, where people would have to diffuse interpersonal conflict. But as the technology has grown and increased and everything else, now we have sensors, that I'll show my Aggie ring here. It probably disappears, but we have sensors that are, like a ring that we can put on that will measure those things. They're typically very small intrusiveness, and it allows us the ability to really tell if somebody's being stressed and why they're being stressed. And that's one of the things I'll talk about the flame system just for a second. That's one of the unique things I've seen with the flame system is not only do you have the VR headset, but you have a face mask that you can put on to give you that feeling of being in an SCBA. And they have this heat vest that you can put on under your bunker gear as you're working through it and working through the scenario, and actually feel and bringing in that greater fidelity, which also, if people have a little bit of experience, it also triggers that response or that element to it. So it ties in with that naturalistic decision-making piece that Kirk talked about with recognition prime decision making, and Klein's work on that, which are really important, because I think that is the foundation of what we're trying to get people to do. Not respond mechanically and to a tactical situation, but respond as an intelligent agent that can improvise, because we all know no one single situation is the same.
James, anything you want to add to that?
I guess, yeah, we just talk about kinesthetic learning. We all learn by doing and by making mistakes. And ultimately, whatever training scenario we want to create it so that people can make mistakes safely, learn from their mistakes. And we all know that as firefighters, every job we go to, we make a mistake. I don't think there's ever been a perfect job. But if we can lay in bed that night and think to myself, I won't do that again. I've learned from that. That's how we evolve and become better firefighters and better. And also that helps us educate the next generation. But what we see, I guess, is huge skills fade in the fire service, certainly over here in Australia and in my travels around the world. We need to be putting people into when I talk about immersive training environments, that could be real world training, could be virtual immersive, could be VR, whatever, more often, more regularly, in situations where their stress levels are elevated. It could be because there's been a structural collapse, and we introduce the sound of a baby crying or something into some of our environments, and we monitor people's biometrics, and you should see the heart rate just spike. As I said, let people get into stressful situations where they can move outside their training and their doctrine that they're used to, and see how they behave. And I think that's where we're going to get the best training outcomes is when we put people outside their comfort zones, because I could get anyone off the street and give them a fire hose and point them towards a fire on a training ground. I'm sure they could put that fire out. But have they done it safely? Have they done it with all of the knowledge of the risks and exposures that they're putting themselves and others into? And I'm just picking up on Justin's comments in the chat, data collection and training for officers. For us, it's all about dynamic risk assessment. As I said, anyone can put a fire out, but should you put the fire out? Where should you stand when you're putting the fire out? If your instructor or your officer is on the radio asking you questions right when you're trying to communicate with someone else while you're delivering orders, whatever it is, that's when you get the stress reaction, is because you've got multiple things happening at once. And that's, kind of what we're trying to explore here with virtual immersive learning. And we go out and train our firefighters these days, and we pretend, and we say, pretend that house is on fire. Let's drag some hose. Let's pretend, it's doing this. And the problem with the Netflix generation, as I call our younger firefighters, is that pretending isn't probably as great as grey-haired people that have read a few books and had to visualize things in our mind's eye. I spend half my time as an instructor talking about, well, the fire's coming out the window. Okay, how big is it coming out the window? So you don't have that common operating picture when you're training using, what most people train with, which is, pretend something's on fire.
Thanks, James. So I wanted to throw it over to Sam Matthews, who I know has got a thing or two to maybe say about this. And then I'm also seeing some questions in the chat from Peter and then Tennessee. So Peter and Tennessee, if you wanted to ask after Sam goes, I'm looking at you. So Sam, the floor is yours.
This is great. Well, I'm about to drive off a ferry, so I'll keep it brief. But I was just going to say, in terms of the adoption rate, something that I've seen on the enterprise side is a lack of understanding of the actual value of the content and the file types that the content comes into. I think it gets a bit obfuscated by HMDs and hardware and what kind of computer you need to run those environments versus what I come across as I collect and build environments from all sorts of different data sources, be it flat maps or old CADs or fire sprinkler CAD drawings even, is that people aren't really aware of who has what files and why. And there's this like adoption thing where if you don't actually have somebody who is going to be in that department forever, who has another buddy in another department of the enterprise or the institution, like you're not going to get that buy-in. So there's this lack of change management that happens. And I think what would be interesting to see in terms of adoption, and I just want to throw it back to you guys for this, is how can we come up with, like we were talking about rural fire departments, say, coming together to all go in on a training environment, but like, how do we help make it clearer to the people buying these environments or using these environments what is theirs, and then how they can keep it, how it can be like, so you're not, there isn't this vendor lock-in to this experience, because I think that's kind of what keeps happening is our experience of 3D or immersive learning is very much mediated by whoever manages to come in and sell us on our use case, versus here are the elements and the layers, here's what you will use that'll be applicable to you that you can keep beyond this program or this game engine. This fire simulation of this burn, this model is now yours, right? So that there's this better sort of support of the change management of an innovative technology that's going through rapid changes, but obviously has huge impact. So just putting that back there.
Any James or Jason Kirk wanted to add on to what Sam just brought up there?
Look, 100%. We need to, and this has been probably the hardest part about introducing these new technologies into these fire services, is really educating what the art of the possible is. And I guess that's what we're talking about today, right? And ownership of the training doctrine is really, really important. One thing we've learned in what we do is that we don't try and train doctrine. Because we're in about 35 countries now, and I don't think I would find two fire services side by side that would argue that fire does one thing and fire doesn't do one thing. But we need to try and give, to your point, I think, Sam, the ownership back to the organizations to enable them to empower their people to use these kinds of technologies as a tool for learning. Much like a hot fire training ground is fantastic, it doesn't mean you're going to get any learning outcome out of putting a group of firefighters onto a training ground without having skilled educators there. Now, probably one of the points I would make is that we're probably going to start to move towards a more decentralized training methodology where the likes of, so Jason and his team might be able to provide training globally because they've got a tool to enable them to put a skilled instructor in with a class on the other side of the world, perhaps. But we just need to be, we need to start that change process of enabling people to think outside the box of their traditional training, to give them ownership of their own training, but also being able to reach out to others and learn from the best. And I can't tell you who the best is. That's up to the individual organization. I think if every fire organization you ask, we're all the best. But I value your thoughts, Jason, Kirk.
Yeah, I think you've really hit on it. It's expensive to come down to Texas A&M. It just getting here is a bit of a challenge, and not every state has a Texas A&M. Not every state has the ability to do live fire burns beyond maybe a Class A fire. And so that presents a challenge when, you're going out and you're dealing with liquid fires or, running fires, whatever. And so being able to decentralize this and distribute the training and then bring in the best of the best, whoever that may be, to help deliver that training is really important. But I think that going back to something I mentioned earlier, it's going to take some changes, and not only in being accepting of the training. I mean, because one of the big challenges I think that we're going to have are the folks that accept the training that we take for credit, whether it's that, the Commission on Fire Protection or, the Volunteer Fire Association or your own department. If they say, and this is a big deal with acceptance of the technology, if they say, look, if you did that in a virtual world, we won't accept it. That's problematic. And it really creates an issue. So we're going to have to change some of those mindsets. But in addition to that, we're also going to have to work with the instructors and with the instructional designers and the folks that design the curriculum, whether they're designing it for a large audience or for that individual department, so that they understand how to, and go on to what Dr. Mullins was talking about, so they understand how to properly and adequately insert these tools into the training regimen. Because while they're great and entertaining, these tools, if you're not taught how to use them, can help people learn bad habits just as well as they can the good habits. And so we've really got to spend some time thinking about what makes that good training writ large, and then how do these tools help, and I think this is Dr. Mullins' words, enhance that existing training. And so that's going to take a little bit more thought in the technology. This is the startling thing for me. And you've heard Dano talked about it, Dr. Mullins has talked about it, Kirk's talked about it, and Kevin's talked about it, is, folks, the technology is here. It's there and adequate. We've seen videos of it today. So are we ready to implement that into our training? Okay, I'll be quiet for a little bit.
Well said. More Jason. We appreciate that. So there are some questions in the chat that came out. I think T. Hennessy, I think that Timothy Hennessy, as well as Peter. Would either of you like to come on and just say, kind of ask, maybe tell us who you are, ask a question? Peter Darley. We'll go Peter Darley and then Tim Hennessy. Just kind of your question, who you are, question, and we'll expand the combo.
I think part of what I was asking Kevin in the chat has somewhat been answered by Dr. Mullins and Dr. Moats, and Sam kind of, I think, addressed it too, and really is what, what does really have to happen so that these learning technologies are embraced and adapted, as a training tool at a quicker pace. And so, you look at all the advantages, whether it's, over cost comparisons, being safer, interest for new hires, it's certainly environmentally friendly. The disability to train with foam is a problem almost everywhere. So, I just, is a missing piece or one of the big barriers that there aren't any major learning organizations, perhaps or accreditation organizations like NFPA that hasn't addressed it in a document in writing. Is that one of the big barriers, or is it really just, hey, there's going to be some resistance to change, and this is going to take more time for this technology to be adopted at a quicker pace?
So I'll jump in here and say, we really don't know what the exact barriers are. And I think that that's a great question we need to ask. I know what my feelings are, and I know really, in speaking of technology in general, what needs to happen in order for it to be accepted. But our public safety culture is a little bit different than the general audience. And so where some people, we're not just dealing with some people's jobs and their performance of, if they say they were in the banking industry and they miscount money or they don't fill out a piece of paper correctly, it can cause a little bit of a financial loss or a big financial loss. We're in a business where there are high consequences to the things that we do. And I think there's a lot more scrutiny and a lot more risk aversion to going off of what are accepted as the tried and true measures. So as we work through this, we need to ask that question and say, what are your concerns? What will work for you? And how do you use it? I think those are really important questions to go.
Well said, Jason. Kirk?
Oh, there's so much to, yeah, I'm off mute.
Yeah, you're off
So
mute.
much to cover here. Somebody mentioned, and we can start with just 2D screen training, not necessarily in front of a heads-up display. Absolutely, keep doing that. We have so many opportunities before us, and we still argue about the size and shape of water. Smoothbore fog, 1 3/4 inch, 1 15/16 hose, smoothbore, pressure, and so on. It's been 350 years that fire hose has been around. So we are early in immersive learning, but I say 8th graders are going to do science class and mixed reality while we're still arguing about it. So I'm grateful for folks like my friend Captain Carissa, I'm going to call out right here, who's, I believe, trained 3 academies in VR. And at one point we just asked some neutral questions. And this is for Casumas Fire, who I think has a really good training program. Between Art of Reading Smoke, Live Fire, Dollhouse, and Justin, your turn here, and immersive learning, where did they learn the most? Would you share for a minute about your experience in this and what they had to say?
And Timothy, I'm going to come to you afterwards, but I called on you. But Justin, floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, so we did do a few academies, and what we found was that the information that they were able to absorb in conjunction with the virtual reality training was way better. We weren't able to put everybody initially through virtual reality. We had different groups in those what Kirk just mentioned, the Dollhouse, Art of Reading Smoke, our flashover prop, and then we had a virtual reality. And so they all rotated through about an hour in each area. And the virtual reality group got way more out of the flash can because they had already been in it. So we had previously filmed the 360 in the flash can, and then we showed them that, and then we talked about fire behavior. We talked about what they would see in the flash can, and then they were able to go in there and actually absorb more information. You guys were talking about, putting a mask on and it raises the heart rate. We just never got, we never felt like they did a good job of absorbing information prior to virtual reality. And so the virtual reality was just another layer that made them that much more comfortable. Instead of just throwing them in there and say, pay attention, we were able to give them that information. And then with the feedback, the group that was in the flash can first, they unanimously said, we wish we would have done virtual reality first, because all the stuff they saw now makes more sense. So it was just the opposite of what the virtual reality group did first. So it was definitely interesting. I'm a small group of people that did. I don't have a lot of data there, but it definitely showed in that small application. I know some of you guys speaking right now have way better data on that. So thanks for letting me share, and everybody, this is awesome.
Thanks, Justin. And I think kind of Kirk, you want to kind of like wrap, and Kirk, Jason, James, I want to keep allowing for more thoughts and ideas, but kind of rapid fire response or anything you want to add on to what Justin just said.
And I'm going to put some more things on the chat that are relevant to Palmer Dollhouse and so on. But what Justin said about the cognitive load, information digestion. So for the 25, 30-year firefighter who's maybe been out on a couple hundred actual active emergency fires, that when there's an instructor talking about flow path, bi-directional flow, heat release rate, conversion to steam and feedback and various things in the firefight training modality, the veteran is able to listen to that because they're not afraid for their life in that moment that they're in the live fire. Whereas the cadet is just trying to figure out if they're going to run out of air, is their suit going to protect them? What if there's a problem with their breathing apparatus? They're not able to absorb in the way the veteran can't. And so immersive learning, lots of academic studies just talk about the efficiency of the absorption of knowledge. And Justin, thanks so much for your words. And I'll put a few things in the chat that were relevant.
James, any 2 cents?
Really, really quickly, 2 things firefighters hate changing the way things are is the standard joke, I guess. But I think we're really on the start of that hockey stick of acceptance. And there's always the early adopters. We're starting to see the early adopters really running with this kind of technology. And I think we'll get fast followers because the proof will be out there. It's really, really hard to, I think Justin's point earlier, to get A/B testing because we don't have a lot of data from our real burns, from our real learning experiences, because it's the environment that we operate in. It's really hard to sit there with a pen and paper and capture data of what people are doing. In most fire training grounds, at least. So, we're starting to get those case studies. We're starting to really see, that people are seeing it making a difference to their firefighters. And I strongly believe we're on that start of that hockey stick of acceptance of this kind of technology.
Thanks, James. And again, no, this is not just a conversation. This is a movement of conversation. So while we are kind of creeping up in the hour, we might go a little bit later. Just keep firing stuff in the chat. And if we don't answer it now, we will answer it later. But Timothy, I really appreciate your question. Maybe if you want to quick introduce yourself and kind of tell us your question, and we'll build on that. Timothy, if you're still there, the floor is yours.
Hey, how you doing? My name's Tim, 26 years in fire and emergency services, started as a backstepper, worked my way up to chief till I went into private fire protection, working for Tesla. So just interested in the options or the availability from predictive tactical modeling for certain scenarios that we may face specifically where we're not able to really do a live fire training for certain processes that involve our industry. Then if we were able to build that into with fire behavior, computational fluid dynamics, I'm also interested in the next path forward where we deal with a lot of code enforcement officials where we may want to do something where we can actually walk them through, hey, this is what this scenario looks like. Here's what our pre-plans are. So it's everything from internal pre-planning to the external pre-planning, just interesting thing to see and looking forward to more information.
Love that question. Kirk, and honestly, if anyone else wants to answer that too, please, but James, I'll throw that to you first.
Right. Look, I guess when we talk about computational fluid dynamics in our models, we certainly use CFD to validate what we do, but unfortunately CFD is too slow to work at real time in virtual environments where you're actually suppressing the fire in real time. Having said that, we've got about 40,000 hours into our models now of our fire science and behavior. And we always talk to the purists of fire science when we go into an organization, because that's generally who we're pushed in front of when we go into a fire service. And, I'm a student of fire science myself. And one of the interesting things is that in the real world, when we get to a job, we don't know the 400, 500,000 variables that are impacting us on a job. We don't know if the rear of a structure is going to collapse. We don't know the chemical makeup of the gases above us. We don't know the fuels that are being burnt. But what we need to do is give people the experience of a typical environment and have things like structural collapse happen. Now, for your example, I guess, being able to teach people and run people through the what ifs. What if this happened? What if the weather conditions were this? What if it was raining? What if this kind of fuel load is there? That's all built into these new models and simulations. So we are burning real fuels. We're off-gassing, we're creating volatile organic layers above our heads, we're dropping neutral planes. We often find that our biggest supporters of this kind of technology and our biggest supporters into the fire service are the politicians that we put into it, because they have no idea what we do. When we put them into our kinds of technologies, they have a newfound respect for what the firefighters on the ground do. And giving them that sense of immersion into any kind of virtual environment with kinesthetic learning means that they're effectively there. They're already sold, they're on board, and you can ask them pretty much anything when they come out of these experiences, because it really is engaging. It is the next generation of engagement. Hopefully that answered the question.
Ferk or Jason, anything you want to add on to that?
I'll just say I sent Chief Anacia a note and said I have a lot of raw material on that. I'd ping him via email, but absolutely on the way to Professor Dr. Moats's comments on we're moving to this operationally. What about smart buildings and IoT sensor fusion and quantum and edge compute? And I want to caution myself because Dr. Mullins would really be able to know the answer, but how close are we? And maybe to Dano also, with teams like Microsoft and cloud compute, how close are we to be able to do gaming technologies in real time and save some lives? At the very least, we have a very interesting learning opportunity with what we have now and what's here tomorrow.
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I just wanted to chime in on my comment about there's, I think, an opportunity that's been very undertapped in actually not using the person to mediate the virtual experience, like I was saying in my comment, but actually representing people as agents or representing an experience as an agent and capturing that. An example being, being able to see a route on a screen being played continuously to the nearest exit at an elevator versus a flat map. The personalization aspect that you can do by taking an environment or a scenario and then kind of running different agents through that experience, be it somebody in a wheelchair or whatever. And then I think, and kind of making that context available to people from the environment. And kind of skipping over this mediation of headsets, this adoption of technology, this conversation, and focusing in on what's possible when we actually start showing the context of 3D to people in hyper relevant situations.
Thank you, Sam. This is kind of everyone kind of building off the thoughts and ideas. Kirk, you had kind of brought that in. Sam kind of built on it, but Dano or Christina, or I see Jim Leonardis, I see you're out there, but kind of looking at you, Dano, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, just a quick one. So, with respect to Captain Kirk's question about, when's the technology going to advance enough for this to be ubiquitous within the emergency services? I think from a tech standpoint, if you're talking just about, head-worn face computers, heads-up displays, the only technologies that are lagging behind for ubiquitous support, especially for, people doing fire suppression, is display and battery, and the ability to integrate with PPE, and the prohibitive cost associated with building those devices. The second piece, I think, is really not about the technology, and there's two other pieces to this. The first is, being from Microsoft, I mean, we're a for-profit company, right? It is prohibitively difficult to sell to emergency services. So, I mean, we did IVAS with the Army because there is one, program office that we have to engage with in order to get the level of funding required to develop or co-develop a new headset. I don't think that there's any, fire department, nor would we ask them to, that could provide $500 million to co-develop a new family of technologies. So the acquisition piece is a challenge. The companies who make the technology, the headsets and other pieces of infrastructure, they have to go for the largest potential customer or market. And even though emergency services is, doing onesies and twosies at a time is a challenge, and one that I'm trying to overcome, with Microsoft. The other piece to it that's not really technology based is, I've worked a lot with federal law enforcement, less so with emergency services and fire services. And this is generational, right? There are still people my age, that, may not embrace technology, as quickly because they didn't need it. They're amazing firefighters, and they didn't have the advantage of the gaming or toy technology. So there's a change management and a socialization and evangelizing piece to that. The other piece is, and this is really more on the technology companies too, is we're requiring organizations to make an investment in infrastructure and training, that impacts a lot of their operations, with not really, that is not comparable to anything other than a truck or a huge piece of equipment. And so even though, it's horrible talking about, crass pricing and selling and, how we use sales vectors in order to deploy it. I mean, these are really the biggest challenges facing us, not so much from the technology side. Sorry for rambling.
Well, I want to jump in there because this is one place where we do have some influence from the public safety standpoint, which is there's a lot of technology that's being developed by, for DOD, and you've heard us talk about, the Air Force Research Lab, the Office of Naval Research, but also for NASA and things like that. And one of the things that seems to have faded over the years is the vibrant technology transfer programs that we've had, and I think that this is something that from a community perspective that we ought to be going back and saying, wait a minute, there's all this technology. IVAS is a great example of that. There's all this technology that's being developed for DoD applications that when put into the right hand and put into a process to transfer it, to interpret it for public safety, as opposed to translate it for public safety, which is simply handed over. It has been fairly effective in creating new opportunities and helping get that technology, some most advanced technology, into the hands of the first responder at a price point that can be understood. And I think that's something that we really need to think about, and because Dan was right. It's expensive for an IVAS headset. It's expensive for the network to be able to hold it and to have it distributed around. That doesn't mean we shouldn't stop trying, and it sure means that we need to do more to get that in our hands.
Well said, Jason. And I think we're going to go for another 7 minutes. I'm going to do a hard stop 10 minutes after the hour, and feel free to jump off, whatever. But for everyone else that's in this chat, that hasn't talked yet. Christina, Emil, Dale, H. Ramos, Chris Gantz, Daniel, Jan Leonardis, throwing it out there. This could just be a question or anything, but is there anything that anyone who hasn't talked yet just want to say or question? Kind of leave this crickets for 15 seconds if anyone has the desire to say something. If not, it's totally fine. You could throw it in the chat. Chris, you're at the basketball game. That's it's fair. It's fair. Okay. Well, why don't we do kind of just like final thoughts from James, Kirk, and Jason? I kind of like doing this in the podcast of like, give me a mic drop, something that is like a challenge, a question. I'll kind of actually go first. I put it in the chat. It is a favorite quote that I heard is, under pressure, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to your level of training. That's why we train so hard. Said by an anonymous Navy SEAL. So that's a quote I want you all to leave with and think about today. So James, thoughts, questions, kind of mic drop from you.
Perfect. And I do have to jump off, so I do apologize all. I guess really for me, it's about getting your people to understand what the art of the possible is, get them into the system. You can't understand and what this kind of technology can enable your people to do unless they're in it. We have so many times where people are back of the room, arms crossed, never touching that, never going to be involved in that kind of useless thing. Some of the comments on some of the websites and videos that we post are really quite mind-blowing. But as soon as we get these people into the system, they understand how they can train the next generation to be better than they are. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. We're trying to leave the next generation to learn more, to get them more experience than we are. And I think these technologies are a part of that.
Thanks, James. And then we'll pass
Mike,
it over to
out. So thank you very much, everyone.
you, James.
Thank you, James.
I will throw it over to you, Kirk. Actually, we'll go Jason, then Kirk.
Yeah, I don't know that I have any mic drops. I think that our environment is changing, especially as we continue to roll further and further away from the grip that the global pandemic had on us. The context has changed. The way that we train has changed. The training that we're doing has changed. And the tools that we have, and it's important that we emphasize that, things like Flame and River and these other technologies are tools. They're virtual shovels. And just like a fire tower is a tool, we have to come up with ways to make meaningful training, and that's going to mean changes in how we approach this and what we do with it. And the people that do this are also going to have to change, because what worked in 2019 is likely not going to work in 2025. There will still be some overlaps, but I think that we're going to have to think about what that change means for us and how that's going to happen. And then in addition to that, we're going to have to talk to the folks that sign off on our stuff and say that this is applicable training, this is acceptable training, and work that out. So I wish I had a very poignant and demonstrative step, but that's all I got.
Hey, that's what we're talking about. Just spreading and sharing. As James mentioned earlier, the fire service is about sharing ideas and sharing best practices, and that's what these roundtables are for. So we'll go to Kirk to round us out here.
Yeah, and absolutely agree, Professor Moats, that I saw that coming maybe 15 years ago, that in my academy, we had something like 400 sign-offs we had to get, including the 375-pound wood tormentor ladder, 65 feet tall, the ground ladder, and it was exhaustive, checking off on everything, all of our knots, like, could you tie your shoelaces? And then I saw, a firefighter one packet later from the state, it was like 28 sign-offs. And, oh, would you sign me off for rescue today? I'm like, rescue is one sign-off? I could not like, rescue is a discipline, and it'll take a month of working 4 hours a day before I'm signing you off on rescue. So the other thing that I think for me, the mic drop is, it's coming, like it or not. Look at the Metaverse Forum. Look at what is on the shelves for this coming holiday season. Look at what 8th graders are doing in science class. And the fire service will adapt. We are an adaptive group, with or without dinosaurs like myself. Look to the digital natives, the next, the generation who started building their own computers when they were 5 and 6 years old. And we will change, because it's inevitable. And build it, to Dana's point. Yeah, don't build it for our industry. Build it for the 315 million plus US citizens and the roughly 7.5 billion souls on the planet who are not first responders. And then harden it, encrypt it, make it private and secure where applicable for the 10 million first responders in the US and maybe 100 million worldwide. But build it for everybody else. There's the business case. And then we'll do what we can to use it to save lives. Thank you for having me, Kevin. Thanks to everybody.
The ultimate mic drop amongst everyone. This is, again, not just one conversation. This is a movement of collaboration, and I just really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you to everyone that came. We'll do a recap and send this out afterwards. And again, continue to DM me on LinkedIn, Twitter, email. If you got questions, ideas, or feedback, let us know. But again, have a great rest of your Monday. Thank you for your time today. And I hope you all have a great rest of your Monday. Until next time.